My first guest today is Sergiu Ardelean, CEO and co-founder of Artivive, an app devoted to bringing art back to life. He will be talking about the Museum of the 21st Century and what role technology plays in it. So without further ado, please welcome Sergiu.
Thank you so much, Ronya, and thank you very much for having me today here. As mentioned, I will talk about the Museum of the 21st Century, and I have also a presentation for you that we'll have a look. First of all, we'll go to the museum today, and I will bring you to Belvedere. This is how Belvedere looks today, but it could be also a picture of Belvedere how it looked many, many years ago, because the museum itself didn't change a lot. Unfortunately, also the experience that we have in the museum didn't change a lot. We have almost the same experience that our grandparents had, most museums offer, which is a good thing in a part because they're conserving and preserving art and displaying it as it is, and we can see the masterpieces live. But let's look at one of these artworks a little bit closer. So this is Edith, Schiele's wife, painted by Egon Schiele. And the story was that in 1917, when he sold the artwork to Belvedere Galleries, actually looked different. But unfortunately, the story is nowadays transmitted through audio guides. And to follow the story takes a lot of time and understanding to imagine how the artwork really looked like. And this is how many and most museums are presenting the artworks, besides having the tours and having the art historians and the guides showing the artworks. But imagine in a way how the artwork could come to life and tell its own story through technology, where the visitor can decide how to interact with the artwork and how far they want to go with the story. So they can also decide how to jump in. And what we can see here is that we can go into detail and to show exactly how the painting was changed or how the painting looked like in the first version and understand the story without having too many numbers to remember and too many facts, but more to go on the storytelling part. So what we also saw after people tried and interacted with this artwork and technology, that they had a different bounding. So they put the phone aside because this was the first thought that we had, that it's another screen and it's the only place where people are going without a phone and they can have a pose from the screen. But unfortunately, people are still taking the smartphone with them. It's the only item that comes into the museum with them. And many times they're also distracted by the phone because it's beeping and you're receiving some messages as well as making some pictures and selfies. But what we're doing with the technology is taking this phone away and give it back to the art. And it's about the story. So how we build, in this example, the whole project was, it's not about the technology. People will not come to the museum a second time to experience the same technology, but understand the art, understand the story behind it. And people are very fascinated by stories. So in this way, people receive the information, and many, because we observed them, put the phone away and tried to find the bits of color of the first version of the artwork. And when they found it, they had this amazing feeling seeing how the painting really looked like and understanding the story which is behind. But now imagine that we have artworks that are interpreted by artists that are still living, like we did it in Albertina with the Juan Miró artwork, where a living artist from Vienna interpreted this artwork for birds and insects in a totally new way, in the understanding that she has. So therefore, the museum's visitor has a totally different experience. First of all, they see the original, but also see a different interpretation. So they can go a little bit deeper into the artwork and have their own thoughts without having to study very much the whole story behind it and listen to the audio guide. And we did in our projects around the world some surveys, and we learned that people really enjoy it. Because it's much more approachable for the visitor to interact with the artworks and have a better understanding. So we have here an average point of 9.1 from all our questionnaires, and people would like to see more of these artworks. And funny enough, we also asked them if they would like to recommend it to a friend. 100% said yes. If they want to see more exhibition this way, 100% yes. And if they would like to see more artworks in this way displayed, so yes. So at the first, when we started working on this project, we were a little bit afraid that maybe the technology is not the right place in such a museum, but we saw that it's making, for many people, so much more fun to interact and that get the message from the artworks. And if we're thinking about audio guides, the problem there sometimes can be that it's very hard to understand the flow of the audio guide. And there are so many informations that we have to process. We have just one way to interact with the information, is just the audio. So it takes a longer time to tell a story, and therefore it has 5, 6, 7 minutes. And after 10 artworks, we are done for the day. We cannot take any much more. But with technology and with augmented reality in this case, we can tell the same story in 30 seconds. So they can go to the next artwork, have a different view of the whole exhibition and collection. And now, to see some of the projects that we did with our community, to try to understand how this technology can change a medium. For example, posters. We had an exhibition also here in Vienna, not far away from House of Bandits on the Rheindorfgasse, where we worked together with artists around the world to understand how the medium poster that we have for hundreds of years, displaying and taking our attention, could go into the digital space. And if you're looking at these two examples, so on the left we have a sum of elements that are on the poster, which is very hard for us to comprehend and understand. So how our brain works is like we're seeing everything as a whole. We see the different colors, but it's very hard and it takes a lot of energy to go into details, to understand the details. The moment that the movement is coming in, it's a totally different way. So on the left example that we have here, we can then identify that there is a pizza, there is a salami much easier than if the image is not moving. And on the right is something that is happening totally different. So we have a stylized hand that is moving, and the first frame that we have, the first part in the poster, the one that is taking our attention, is something that we cannot identify. The moment that we see the hand moving, we will not unsee it again. So we will always know that this is a hand. So these are just some examples of many, many ways how we saw that artists and creatives are working with this medium. And what we also saw in the last year now with all the tourists missing and the empty cities, that it's time for these institutions to interact with local artists and local communities, to build up a dialogue. And I think the Museum of the 21st Century will have a way how to build on the content and the artworks they already have, to build a dialogue, to invite local communities to interpret and work on the exhibitions that they have together and create new ways for the visitors to interact. So that means that being at the museum, going at a Saturday morning to the museum or the Saturday to the museum will be a fun thing to do. So I think that technology not only gives an opportunity for the visitor to interact with the artworks, but also for local communities, local artists to interact with the art and find a channel for a dialogue. And when I'm thinking about the Museum of the 21st Century, we see a lot of new ways how technology can bring a total immersive experience. But I think the solution, the end solution will be a hybrid between the technology and the artworks that we have in the collections in the institutions. So if I'm summing up the whole part of how the Museum of the 21st Century would look like, it will be, first of all, interactive. So it will be the next step where we can interact and be part of the artworks, as well as the art much more approachable. It shouldn't be a way where you have to have a lot of knowledge about the house or the exhibition, about the art, about the collection before you go in to understand. You can just jump in, and the idea also for the experience and the art is to have your own interpretation. And so much happens on the phone right now, and the only part where we are missing it is in this cultural parts with institutions where we are deprived by the technology to get faster and easier to the information that we're seeking. The best part is also for the museums because they don't have to invest in hardware. Everybody's coming with a smartphone inside the museum so they can use their own hardware. They don't have to spend much money for that as well. And there is also no maintenance. So that means that they don't have to keep it up alive and they don't have to update the hardware and to see that they are at the state of the art. And when they're not spending money on hardware and maintenance, they can spend the money on content. And I think this is the most important part for the Museum of the 21st Century, to invest in content, to work with local communities, what I also mentioned, to find new ways. And with the technology, if the museum has the same exhibition, the same collection, we have a different time, a different dimension, which is time which is coming to it. So that means that in a way we can use the same artworks but have a different interpretation. We can have a university class to interpret the whole collection. We can have local artists, or we can invite artists from all over the world to bring their own perspective. We had, for example, a project with the United Nations where the job of the artist was to interpret peace in the way they were seeing. And I was so surprised to see what peace means for somebody who's from Africa compared to somebody who's from Asia compared to the Western world. Because what for us is obviously means for somebody to be free, to be at peace. Like I mentioned, I think this is the thing that I want you to take from the whole part, is that the Museum of the 21st Century is a dialogue, is working with local communities, bringing people in, bringing the creatives in, and giving them a chance to have a stage to interact with the artworks and the collection that they have. The last point is also the data collection, because nowadays the most institutions know how many people are coming into their house, to the exhibitions, but they don't really know how much time they're spending and how they're looking at the different artworks. And when we have the technology, also with augmented reality, automatically we have a data set that we can use and understand better how people are working or watching the artworks, and also building on this dialogue to understand how things can be made better. Yeah, a little bit about Artivive. So we have a community of 90,000 artists, still growing. Most of those came to us in the last 12 months. We have more than are actively using the app to consume art. We're also working a lot with universities, locally and internationally, to see how the students and the future generation will bring these two worlds together. Because I think this is also a very important part. What we're doing with this technology, with augmented reality, is we're building on the traditional way of creating and consuming art, extending it to the digital, and at the same time, we're bringing the digital artists into the museum, giving them a space, and giving them also a different value. Because the moment that you're taking to go to a museum, to see an exhibition, and to interact with the art, is the moment, the value that you're also projecting on that artworks. We have so many creative artists who are stuck on some Instagram accounts and trying to build up communities and build up followers because they are missing the attention that the artwork should be there. Because if we're thinking just about Instagram, you have an infinite scroll, and you can scroll further and further until something that you think that it's interesting is coming. So the attention span is very small. But if you're going to a space, to a museum, the use cases that we have done, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or you would like to do a project. Thank you very much.